right. Hello, everyone. I think people are going to slowly tune in. I'm here today chatting with John McKenna. Sally, I understand, is behind the camera. She's not going to appear, but together they run a page on Substack called John and Sally McKenna. And I'll let maybe John introduce a little bit the work that they do for all of you that are not familiar. I think if you are in Ireland, and anyone who knows about food in Ireland definitely would have come across their very well-known guide. It's just called the McKenna Guides, right?
Yes. There's a really a kind of series of titles that we created about 35 years ago. Actually, this week I've just finished the most recent iteration, which is the 100 Best Restaurants in Ireland.
Oh, yes.
So that's published by the Sunday Times. Now that'll be out in about 3 weeks. And the origin of that actually goes back to 1991, when we decided that it would be a very good idea to, why not tell everybody that there's 100 good restaurants in Ireland? Because at that point, Ireland, did it have a food culture? Not really. If what the food culture it had was subterranean, and it has small number of restaurants. So in doing the first book, I remember back in 91, which was published in 92, we struggled to get 100 restaurants. We really did. It was very hard, despite covering the whole island, and we write about all 32 counties, not just the Republic and Northern Ireland. And we struggled. Now, with the new book, for example, I was just actually throwing away some pages because I'm so old that I still write out things by hand, and
Amazing.
Just looking at the endless permutations that you now have to go to when you're actually boiling something down to 100 contemporary Irish restaurants. So that's reflective.
That's crazy, right? Because it's such a radical change in a way, not such a long amount of time.
In really what's a generation, which is not a long time, but it's been for us very fulfilling because we've been able to report about this little kind of culinary revolution in real time, and to report on the people who cause it, create it, and have created it. And in a sense, yes, I mean, going back over, our very first book came out in 1989, but that book was more about food producers than about restaurateurs, for really quite a simple reason. We didn't have any money to go to restaurants. If you're a serious restaurant critic, you have to pay the bill. If you're getting free stuff, no, sorry, that doesn't count. So we didn't have the money to pay the bill. We actually started the idea of writing about Irish food by buying a car for £100 in 1989. And we drove all around the country. And the secret to it became the fact that I became really smitten with these wonderful people whom we met. And it wasn't just restaurateurs. It was cheesemakers. It was organic growers. It was people who farmed oysters. Small number of bread bakers then, but the bread baking has been part of the recent revolution. And I thought these people were remarkable. And I should explain that I'm a recovering lawyer. So before I met all these lovely, lovely people who work with food, I had been hanging out with lawyers, which I really don't recommend for your mental health. And then suddenly,
so let me get for the beginning, because this is very interesting. So at that stage, you were living where?
In Dublin
or in the north?
Yeah.
Oh.
No,
You're
we were living in
north, right?
Dublin. I'm from Belfast. I'm actually from Andersonstown. When I was born there, it wasn't. It became later very well known for being pretty much an IRA ghetto. It wasn't when I was born there. It was just a sort of huge collection of houses for working class Catholic families. And then I went down to Dublin as a student, but I was a law student, and I became a barrister after that. But interestingly enough, the two things that have coincided in my work is I began to write for Hot Press magazine, which late last year just celebrated its 50th birthday.
Oh, okay. So writing about music, for people that don't know Hot Press magazine.
I originally started writing about music very, very badly. That was the era of what they used to call experimental journalism, and all my experiments failed. The journalism was terrible, but maybe they perhaps they just didn't have it. They didn't have anybody else who wanted to listen to the weird stuff, And
See.
I wanted to listen to the weird stuff. So I was very happy if they would say, please take home this LP and give us 350 words on it. And then you got paid a small amount of money. So this was whoa, fantastic. Dublin in the 1970s was extremely depressed.
Mm,
Nobody had any money. Nobody had any money. And it stayed that way throughout into the late 1980s. So Sally, after we married in 1982, also kind of worked in in the publishing side of magazines, and I wrote, I reviewed books, I reviewed films, but mainly wrote about music. Starting then, and then quite interestingly, kind of coincided with punk from around about 1976, which to
yeah.
me was there was very little good music in punk, but there was a lot of very good attitude. You know, it was really, to quote George Melly, who said it about Elvis Presley, it turns revolt into style. And that was really what punk did. It wasn't really about
Mhm.
music, it was about an attitude. And so I kind of thought, well, I've never written professionally, but sure, why not? It worked.
And
Well,
was
it
that
didn't.
something that was very present in the Dublin scene?
Yeah,
Punk stuff or?
yeah, there was a scene there. I mean, we did have bands like The Clash and so on. I remember seeing The Clash out in
Yeah.
Dunleary. Terrible band, but anyway, people revere them, and what's to revere? So we did have the then hot English bands arriving. And then there was a bit of a scene with the Blades. And then, of course, famously, right in 79, 80, U2 began
Mm.
to be a really significant presence in Dublin. So yeah, there was a scene,
Mm.
not well known, but very good fun to write about. Very, very, very entertaining to write about.
So, I just realized yesterday, as I was thinking about this chat today, that today is marks exactly 20 years since I moved to Ireland.
Oh,
Believe it or not,
wow.
to the day, the 1st
Congratulations.
of March,
Happy birthday.
2006. So I was like, okay, this is perfect because I presume we're going to talk a lot about Ireland today.
Uh-huh.
But I was reflecting on the fact that, going back to the food, especially, things have changed so dramatically, even food wise, for me, or the way I'm aware of, at least,
Yeah.
since moving here in 2006. So it's interesting that you started the conversation talking about that, right? About this revolution that has happened since you guys have been doing this work. But I wanted to ask you, so you were saying, what triggered exactly this change of career, this deciding to, invest? Because I presume at the time, like you said, there was nobody talking about this. It was hard to compile 100 restaurants. What was the trigger? What were you thinking when you guys said, okay, we're going to do this?
Um, you know, part of the thing about being a barrister in Ireland was you worked in a big building in Dublin, the law library, and the legal profession then had quite long vacations. So
Okay.
Sally and I would just go and travel around Europe by train because we didn't have any money and it was the cheapest thing to do. And I had no work, just literally didn't. If you work as a barrister, you're independent, so you need a good series of contacts to supply work with to you, and I didn't really have that. So we would go off and do the European capitals, do Istanbul, go down to Sicily,
Okay.
one of my favorite visits, and it was during. It was in Rome one time, and I think I was probably dragging Sally to some gallery in the morning, then dragging her to another gallery in the afternoon. And at some point, we were sitting having lunch, and I thought, hang on a second, I'm making a big mistake here because I'm saying to myself, I'm trying to be a cultured person, and I'm saying, oh, I've got to go and see the Sistine Gallery, amazing gallery with the Sistine Chapel, and I've got to go and see the Pantheon and so on and so forth. And then I realized actually, and it sounds trivial, but I realized that the culture was actually on the plate right in front of me in the place I was eating.
Mm.
So it was a Damascene moment. I sort of thought, hang on a second, the culture is right here. Not only is it here, it's not done by a dead person. It's done by somebody who is working and creating in the moment. And to me, that was a realization. I'd had kind of had that realization as well with as my music tastes evolved more into jazz, that creating in the moment was actually what culture was actually about. It wasn't about looking at paintings on a wall or looking at statues or watching somebody acting in a play. It was about somebody dealing with something in the moment.
Okay.
And I suddenly thought, wow, that's really, really kind of interesting. And one of the books we used to use when we were in Paris was written by an American journalist called Patricia Wells. And she wrote a number of editions of a book called The Food Lover's Guide to Paris. There was only one problem with that, was she said if she included you in her book and you went to that restaurant, it was full of Americans. So it was kind of like
Of
going to
course.
eat in Iowa, you know? And you thought, oh God, this is terrible. And so she really skewed the restaurants that she wrote about, but she was very, very successful at the time in the mid '80s. And so we just had this idea. We were getting more and more interested in food and cooking, and we happened to literally mention to somebody at a party. Again, this sounds like fairy tale. We said, somebody should do a book like The Food Lover's Guide to Paris, but actually do it about Ireland. And this person said, okay, you do it and we'll publish it. Literally. And they did.
Wow.
And they did. So if you're
This was an Irish party you were at, right?
it was a very Irish party. They were sober. They were sober at the time, and they were true to their word. And 9 months after they said that, excuse me, the book appeared in November of 1989. It was called The Irish Food Guide. And to do it, I didn't really have a job because you're self-employed as a barrister. So, excuse me, I took a sabbatical. We bought a car for £100, and off we went. And the secret to our research was that we discovered all these people who would say, well, do you know Francesco down the road who is making this incredible cheese? And we'd say, well, we don't. How do we find him? Now, there's no sat nav, there's no nothing at this point in time, You'd have some old map. And we put this together because we realized that oftentimes these people actually didn't know each other, but they all shared a commonality, and that commonality was creativity. And I was thrilled by it, and I remain thrilled by it. Nearly 40 years later, it's and that was what did it. But it was serendipitous. It was accidental. I had kind of planned to be, a lawyer earning astronomical sums of money. Well, that didn't work. So the other thing I thought I knew how to do, was maybe to write. But I didn't know how to write a book, of course, because nobody knows how to write a book until you actually do it. But we got this over the line, and then things fell into place. We got lucky. We've always been very lucky people.
You also obviously were at the very, very beginning of all of this. Now it's obvious to talk about this stuff. But I wanted to ask you something else because, I travel a lot and people go, oh, you're Italian. And, I always end up talking about food because that's, that's what I'm thinking about all the time. And they go, oh, you live in Ireland. Oh, God, yeah, I'm sure the food is terrible there. And I'm like, actually, actually not.
No,
And
no.
people are surprised and people don't know about it. I mean, I know there is a little bit more knowledge now, but I just wanted you to say, because you've been there, you've witnessed this revolution, as you said,
Yeah.
pretty much of a generation. Is like, what is, like, how would you describe it if someone says something like that to you, right? They say, oh, yeah, I'm sure the food in Ireland is really not great.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Like, can you talk about what do you think the food in Ireland is now and what has changed since you guys started this work? Because I think people really need to hear it. And I know at least a lot of people who follow me here are from the United States. I don't know about you guys, but there's
Yeah,
definitely
same.
would be good to get to hear you talk about it for a minute. What is this food revolution?
Um, the we can actually date it to a specific moment in time. So I think there's still debate about exactly when the Big Bang occurred. But in 1964, I think in May, a little lady called Myrtle Allen opened up the large house that she lived in, which was called Ballymaloe House in East Cork,
Yeah.
and began to take guests in for dinner. And that was the Big Bang in Irish food, because Myrtle Allen wasn't just a very, very fine cook. She was a really fine cook. She was also a brilliant thinker, a brilliant creative person, a great philosopher. In my opinion, and people ridicule me every time I say this, Myrtle Allen is the single most important person in the history of the Irish state, established 1922, because she established a template of
Mm.
working, which very many people in Irish food still adhere to. Cook local food, put your own style on it, do it modestly, don't do it in a very grand way, um, and cook what you know and what you feel to be true. Today Ballymaloo is world famous,
Yeah.
but it's pretty much the same house that it was when Myrtle opened in 1964. And really, as I say, the kind of template that she used, use local people as your suppliers, um, keep things as simple as you possibly can, and do it honestly. Um, People still adhere to that way of working, and to me, that is um, something that is Myrtle's legacy to Irish cooks. For example, if we were, I mean, let's say we were to take two of the hottest restaurants in Dublin, right? Let's say we take Library Street. Let's take three: Library Street, Alta, Comet. Okay, three
Mhm.
youngish male chefs. There's quite a good chance if you drove down to Wicklow to visit an organic gardener that you'll find one of those guys there picking stuff out, or they'll be in North Dublin at a different organic gardener picking out January cabbage or fresh radishes or rhubarb at the present moment. So that's Myrtle's legacy. That you had a continuous chain which you were in control of, leading from the farm into your kitchen and onto your guests' plate. And she was so admired that a lot of people said, "Well, that's actually a nice way of working." And of course, Ballyblue has become very famous. The Ballyblue Cookery School is internationally famous, draws in students literally of every nationality every year.
Yeah.
But they're actually still doing things the way Myrtle started doing them in 1964. And so you can be in a modern room like Alta or like Comet or like Library Street, but the guys are kind of still thinking a little bit as if Myrtle was, sitting on their shoulder saying, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it this way? So to me, she was very responsible for creating that philosophy of food. But also, she said something really kind of simple, which is food is something to be taken seriously. And the Irish back then took drinking seriously, but they didn't
Mhm.
take food seriously. That's completely now changed.
Yeah.
Um, it's completely changed. She's one of the reasons, she is the main reason, I think, why that happened. And I can see a continuum. Obviously, I wasn't there in 64, but I was there in the mid 80s. And I can see that, continuing right through now to today. So, what is Irish food? It's something characterized by a philosophy and a way of working, which Myrtle Allen incarnated really as long ago now as 1964.
And do you think it's different from any of the other sort of farm to table movements that are in many, different countries, or is it similar philosophy but applied more to Irish?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I sometimes think really what we have in Ireland is a little bit of a Celtic food philosophy. I often compare
Mm.
Ireland, for example, to Scotland. Two countries, very long coastline, Celtic background, but we have much, much better food than the Scots.
Mm.
In Scotland, you have good food in Edinburgh, good food in Glasgow. If you go away from the cities, it can be pretty poor. It can really be quite poor. Why? Well, I don't know. I mean, you could say John Calvin, for example. Calvinism. Scottish people won't spend money. The other thing, and just in relation to that, is Irish people are prepared to spend money on food, which is a difference, say, for example, to between our food culture and, say, England. English people are
Mm.
very, very price sensitive. But we still don't have the very rich cultures which you enjoy in France, Spain, Italy. So we're more analogous to the Nordic countries.
Okay.
The countries like Denmark, for example. When I was a kid, the only thing you knew about Denmark was Danish bacon. And the only people that bought Danish bacon, the only market it had was England. where people would generally say standards were really quite low, you know. Whereas
Yeah,
in Ireland, we didn't have a lot of creativity in food, but we actually had extremely good ingredients, you know. We had a very
that's the thing, right?
unmediated, yeah, we had a very unmediated agriculture. And when we can get the things right with the dairy, I think we have the best dairy.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
can have the best fish because we've got cold Atlantic waters. Our fish, they have to work hard. You know, we don't
Mm.
treat them with enough respect. And obviously, our beef and lamb, when looked after and matured to the right end, are really kind of exceptional. But I think a lot of the farm to table ethos is similar. I mean, you know, Alice Waters in California to
Mhm.
me is a protege of Myrtle Allen.
I
Really,
was thinking about her when you were talking about it. You know, I
yeah,
was wondering if there was a connection, or
yeah.
if
Most definitely. I did an interview with Alice, and she's again a remarkable person, like Myrtle Allen, small, petite, quiet. You know, and as
yeah.
you know, as everybody knows, the small, petite, quiet ladies are the killers. I mean, they are the best. You know, so when I met Alice, it was very, you know, it was deja vu all over again, because the ethos, the affection for growers, the respect, the mutual respect for growers, and for the people who produce the food, it's really the same. And I think you've said it's the same throughout the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And do you think also all this new generation of chefs that are now in some of these, say, more popular restaurants, or do you think they also, a lot of them went abroad and brought back experiences from places that have like a, you use the word rich. I'm actually curious to know what you mean when you say richer cultures, culinarily speaking.
Uh,
You mean
yeah,
historically, or just the fact that there is? You tell me.
I think historically,
Mm,
I mean, I mentioned there France, Spain, Italy, in particular, the Mediterranean
yeah.
countries. You have the bounty of a particularly beneficent climate,
Hmm.
uh, whether it's for growing grapes. I mean, Italy, you know, they can grow grapes from the northern border down to your native Sicily. My goodness,
Yeah,
how
yeah, yeah, yeah.
extraordinary!
Everywhere.
So you're going to have a rich wine culture. Partly it's the good fortune of Mother Nature. It's not necessarily riches, but it's a respect for what Mother Nature can give you, and then and then an ability to utilize it. You know, I always remember the first time I ever went over to slow food. No, I'm wrong. Not to slow food. First time I ever went over to the festival in San Sebastian
Oh yeah.
was shortly after the New York Times had written that the culinary crown had crossed the Pyrenees and that the
Mm,
Spanish were in charge. And Ferran Adria at the time was the
yeah.
man. And I remember being in San Sebastian and being at the salon and Ferran leading out the chefs. And honestly, it was like the Real Madrid football team. It was the Galacticos, you know. The crown is ours. We've won it. Now, in a lot of ways, that modernist cuisine was a bit of a dead end. It didn't really matter. Spain used to be cheap holidays and sangria. Now Spain represented wonderful food. Um, Italy, for very many people, represents the apex of that. I think in some ways, France has lost its confidence in some
Mm.
respects. Um, I'm going to be going there in a little while. But the last time I was down in Provence, I found some of the food was shockingly bad and really
Oh
shockingly
wow,
bad.
that's
Yeah, and surprisingly so. Now, the next time I want to go to Marseille, but of course, the food in Marseille is really, in a lot of respect, what we would call blow-in food. Not actually French
yeah, yeah,
food.
yeah.
It's food from Sicily. It's food from North Africa. It's food from other
Yeah,
cultures.
that's
Food
very
from Italy.
Mediterranean
So
for sure.
it's really really quite different. So I know this is beyond our sphere here, talking about Irish food, but certainly yes, the chefs have gone abroad.
Mm.
And London is still a great city for food. A lot of people will go to London. I noticed you were writing recently about Chizuru,
Oh
and of
yes, I love
course
that place so much,
yeah, well
so much.
the lead chef, when you would have been there, was from Ireland, Christine from
I
Galway.
know. It's crazy. I was in the
Incredible.
room and I had this really Irish moment where I was sitting there with Rhiannon and this woman walks out of the kitchen, this kind of an open kitchen there,
Yeah.
and goes to the table behind and they start talking and they both the people at the table and her were obviously Irish.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
for me, I'm so used to being in Ireland that when I don't notice an accent, it means it's Irish, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. I was going like, oh, they speak with no accent. Oh my God, they're Irish. But they
Yeah.
were doing one
Yeah.
of the classic Irish things that's like, oh, you're from there. Oh my God, my
Yeah.
aunt is this. And it was like, oh, you're my cousin, that kind of Irish thing. So they were
Yeah.
chatting, and then as the chef walked back towards the kitchen, I had to stop her, and I said, "I'm sorry, that was like the most Irish moment ever." And we had a word with her, and she said, "Oh, everyone is Irish in the kitchen here." There was literally like four Irish people in the
Yeah.
kitchen,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that actually because there is a list each year, the Murphy list, drawn up of the kind of Irish chefs who are really making waves in London. And if you wanted to eat really well in London, you could just rely on the Murphy list, and that will be an Irish person in the kitchen,
Okay.
and they'll be kind of there for a few years, and then they'll be getting ready to come back. And I know over the last year, there's been a lot of doom and gloom with a lot of places closing, but
Yeah.
the thing I'm suddenly seeing, and whenever I finish the 100 best restaurants, I try to say, okay, what are the themes that are emerging? You've got 100 places here throughout
Mhm.
roughly 32 counties. So what seems to be coming together? And the answer is head chefs age 24 and 25 years old in good places, which you sort of think, I mean, I don't know about you as a musician, but when I was 24, I didn't know. I knew diddly squat about everything. And here are these
Mm.
guys with important positions. So there's still a lot of energy there. There's a lot of energy. And I think there's energy because people respect chefs in Ireland. They respect their work.
Yeah.
Um, and certainly we've been able to write books about Irish food and they've sold, able to write books about the Wild Atlantic Way, which is a brilliant kind of simple concept. But
Yeah.
really it comes down to people saying, yes, we respect the work that these people are doing. We know in order to do it right, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. There's no alternative. And I think chefs finally, over the last 15 years, have been getting the respect they deserve. Yeah.
It's very interesting because when I first moved here, which is 20 years ago, as I was saying, I came from the Netherlands,
Uh-huh.
and that's where I studied music in The Hague. So I lived there for nearly 7 years, and I can tell you the food scene was. I mean, moved directly from Italy, from Turin actually, because my family immigrated north. So I spent most of my childhood in Turin actually,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
which is also a beautiful food culture, very different from Sicily. But I arrived into the Netherlands, and there was like a cultural shock, especially the
Yeah.
food situation.
Yeah.
And arriving into Ireland, I remember noticing immediately this was kind of the tail end of the Celtic Tiger. There was still money. People were going out and spending money they didn't have on bottles of wine that were super overpriced and things like that. But people were so eager to learn. There was a
Yeah.
thirst because while in the Netherlands, I really felt all the time that I was there, I was getting depressed because for me, people were eating to survive. Literally
Yeah.
felt like we're just eating to survive. And as an Italian, we like, so for me they were like eating to live. We live to eat.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes. Yeah.
everyone in Italy literally lives to eat. They
Yeah.
talk about food all the time. So I came to Ireland and I felt, okay, not maybe there isn't necessarily the same history and knowledge. I'm talking about the average person,
Yeah.
about this kind of stuff. But there is curiosity. There
Yes.
is people are really interested in tasting stuff. They like to try stuff. And obviously Italy has been always very popular here, so it was easy to engage in that kind of conversation because so many
Uh-huh.
people went to Italy on their holidays. But I felt they were like open. They
Yeah.
really wanted to know more about food. And like you
Absolutely.
said, when you said about this
Absolutely.
thing about the respect of it, it made me think about that. But do you think also that's something I'm curious about? Do you think since you guys started writing about food in Ireland and the restaurant scene and the whatever producer, the whole food scene has changed so dramatically? Do you think the way people cook at home has changed as dramatically?
Uh, in the sense, yes, that um, people cook more varieties of food. So you're probably likely to find somebody saying, why don't we have Asian tonight? And we'll get a can of coconut milk and some bok choy or whatever. So in that regard, The thing that worries me a little bit is that cooking takes time. La cuisine prend du temps, and people don't have time. And that's now obviously that can be in some ways good for restaurants, but it's also very, very good for takeaways selling very bad food.
Yeah.
So the time element is more squeezed now for people. However, I still think people cook seriously when they have the time. For
Mm.
men, this is at the weekend. But I mean, for example, if you were to go down to Smoking Soul down in Wexford, Pat and Jim, wonderful guys,
Mm.
make the most beautiful grills. I mean, just the best. And I was at one of their weekends 2 years ago, and it was just incredible. There were a couple of token women, including Sally, but otherwise it was just this big male grill thing with people who were just like super serious, super, super serious, who will spend any amount of money on a grill, any amount of money getting exactly the right fuel. I'm sorry, it's got to be Japanese banchan or
Oh
nothing,
yeah.
Unbelievable. And you sort of think, surely you guys are more interested in like, football and beer. No, they're interested in grilling or they're interested in sourdough bread. I mean, sourdough has now become a religion, essentially.
Yeah.
And again, just as one thing, that's one element that you see in Ireland is a newfound respect for bread. And people also doing experiments with traditional breads.
Mm.
I mean, in his book on Irish food, J.P. McMahon has a recipe for a brown bread which you bake for 75 minutes. Well, you don't bake brown bread for 75 minutes. Yes, you do, if you think about it. And the result is, oh my God, I just didn't think you could do this. You know?
Mm.
And the same, and I know this is a subject very close to your own heart, the same is true of coffee. The same is
Yeah.
true of coffee. And I'll tell you a little story about coffee now. So when we're doing the first book, we're up in County Donegal and we're looking for some proper coffee. So we say to the girl behind the counter, a nice young lady, we say, look, we know you've got the usual stuff, the instant. Do you have any real coffee? And she says, oh yes, it's over there in that black container. And it was a coffee at the time, which was kind of marketed as a premium product, which was called Carte Noire. But it was instant coffee.
Oh, it was
And
also.
Carte Noire. And that was, that was coffee. And then when you look at it now, in Dublin in particular, I mean, what 3FE have done, what they started 20 years ago. And then you see another place we're both great fans of, Brewlab.
Yeah.
It's just simply remarkable what they have done. And if you don't mind, if I could ask you a question, because I know you've written about this, because I've said to some Italian friends, and I said, you do know the coffee in Italy is terrible, don't you? And they just say, get out of here, you
Yeah.
know? And I try to use, I remember one time two of our kids were separately in Italy and came back and said, oh my God, the coffee's so bad. And I said this to my friend Valentina. I said, Valentina, my two kids are just back, big foodies, and they say the coffee is terrible. And she just lost it. She just, get out of
Yeah.
here. You don't know what you're talking about. But you, on the other hand, have admitted that when you go to Italy and you're drinking a cup of Robusta beans, it's
Yeah.
not very good. It's not very good.
Yeah. It's well, it's a lot of things to talk about. Number one, it's very funny. I'm gonna quote Dave Chang. Right, the American Korean chef,
Worst.
right? In one of his podcasts, he's making some food for a Japanese guest, and he says, "Oh my God, I hate cooking for Japanese people." And she's like, "Why? Oh my God, this is great. Why do you hate it?" And he was like, "Well, because you guys know so much about food, you're so prepared. It's like, I give you an example. I prefer to cook for Italians because I know they're going to hate it no matter what. Even if I cook something that they know is better than what their granny cooked, they're still going to say it's
Yeah.
terrible
Yeah.
because I know it's a fact. The Japanese people, instead, they're just going to smile and say that it's great even when they hate it. So I'm never going to know, right? But for me, the funny part was the one about the Italians, obviously. I mean, apart from the fact that I totally agree
Uh,
on both things, because Italians somehow are convinced that they are the best at everything, and you cannot argue with them about it. You cannot
yeah.
touch it. It's like
Yeah.
you're insulting their ancestors. There is this whole thing about history, which is a complete construct, by the way. We're not.
Uh-huh.
If we get into that, we're going to spend 3 hours talking about that. But coffee comes out of this, it's a tradition because it's been done for more than 5 minutes. It entitles them to be the people that know everything about it. Meanwhile, you go into any bar in Italy and you ask, where are your beans from? There's no way the barista knows where the beans are from
No way.
because they all have industrial brands which are doing these blends of usually pretty poor quality coffee,
Robusta beans, yeah, terrible.
Yeah, or, at best a mix of Arabica and Robusta, but like usually pretty heavy on the Robusta, but it's, now Robusta seems to be having a bit of a revival, high quality. But anyway, to cut the long story short, and I used to kind of probably be on the same boat, and because you're so used to drink espressos, and there is a couple of things. Italians love bitter as a taste. It's something that is very present throughout the cuisine. There, even like we drink amaros at the end of the meal, there is like
Verde
a lot of
Branca,
yeah, there's lots of bitter greens. There is a special, like, what's his name? Montanari, the famous food historian in Italy, has written a whole book about this concept, about the concept of bitter in Italian food, right? So coffee is probably connected to that. Also, people like to put a spoonful of sugar in their coffee. And I always say that with a spoonful of sugar and milk, I mean, you can almost drink anything. Literally, almost. Almost. So what, for me, the journey started because I actually started, I had some stomach problems a couple of years ago, and I was kind of trying to experiment a little bit for a while on what was causing these issues. I thought I had some intolerance maybe or something like that. I don't know. But I realized that Italian coffee, was actually making my stomach upset.
Really?
So I started investigating some alternative ideas about coffee, and I came across this woman called Valentina Palange. She's a coffee influencer. I don't know how to describe her. She has a very popular Instagram page where she talks about specialty coffee. And, as you can imagine, in Italy, she gets a ton of hate, for just telling the truth, And she just published a book last year called In Italia il caffè fa schifo, which means in Italy, coffee sucks, which has now been translated into English for the first time. And I remember saying to her, because I made friends with her on Instagram and we chat, and I was always asked for recommendations. And I said to her, look, when the book comes out and you get death threats, you can always come to Ireland, and ask for asylum. You'll be fine there. And she says, and she said, you know what? You have no idea how many people come to me and they go, actually, I've always thought about this, but I didn't dare to say it. Italians, right?
Yeah.
People that actually got upset from that type of really aggressive burnt coffee taste. And I mean, look, I think her point is, and I think a few people finally are starting to notice this in Italy. It's like when you talk about quality, I mean, you can have your own taste and, you can get pretty decent Italian style coffee too, if you know where to go and drink it. But when it comes to quality and when it comes to the way coffee is prepared in Italy, the average is really not good. No. I mean, look at the bar, walk into a bar and observe the barista. Like, do they ever flush the machine between shots? Never. Look in the cone of the grinder. There's you can see the grease of the oil of all the coffee that comes out, that kind of stuff. The fact that nobody knows where the coffee comes from. There is there is another issue that Italians think coffee should cost €1. And that's also not right. And, and I'm not, it's a complicated conversation because it makes you immediately go oh yeah, because you're posh and you can afford expensive coffee. Yes. But the problem with everything, food, clothes, when it's really, really cheap, someone else is paying the price. Exactly. And as you know, coffee, chocolate are such exploitative words when it comes to commodity. And it shouldn't be commodity. That's the bottom line,
Yes,
the problem is the problem is that it's a drug as well. It's the most common psychoactive drug in the world. So people expect to consume it regularly, a lot of it. And so they can't afford, €5 coffee every day, 5 times a day. So it's a complicated conversation, but Italians are very touchy about it. And I mean, I would have been one probably in the past too, until I started learning more. And I started almost retraining my palate about coffee and understanding more actually what is the taste of the coffee bean, And I think, to be honest, and I see this because now I see specialty coffee places popping up in big cities in Italy, really fast. What I notice is that it's much easier to convince Italians to understand coffee via filter coffee. because filter coffee is so different from what Italians are used to drink
Uh-huh.
that it's almost like you're giving them a floral tea of sorts. You're giving it's such a different drink. They don't even connect it to coffee.
Uh-huh.
They go,
Uh-huh.
oh, this doesn't really taste like coffee. That's the first thing that everyone says. So they get much more convinced with that than if you give them a specialty espresso, like a very
Right.
acidic espresso. Italians cannot deal with that because I
Yeah.
think it looks too similar to the espresso they know, but they just can't deal with the acidic taste.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also fascinating, I also think that acidity is something that is not really massive in Italian food culture compared to a lot of other food
Uh-huh.
cultures.
Uh-huh.
So Italians favor bitter versus acidic.
Acidity.
I mean,
Yeah.
maybe in the past there was more of those kind of sottaceti, like pickled stuff, but I don't find Italian cuisine very acidic in general. I feel like, if anything, it lacks acidity,
Acidity. Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if this coffee thing connects to that too, because I always see it I try to make people drink specialty espressos and they're all like, oh my God, this is horrible. And it's the acidity that they can't
Yeah.
deal with,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, I definitely think in Italy coffee sucks. I don't drink it anymore in the average bar. I mean, I can't even smell it. It has got to a place where people are bringing the coffee to the table. I'm like, oh my God, it smells like burnt tar. And I usually try not to get into the argument because most of the time it's a
Yeah.
waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there are people. I think there are people who are willing to be educated and
Yeah.
to go, you know what, we're not the best at everything.
Yeah. Well, it is, and it is remarkable, when you see, if you said to me, "I'm going to Belfast tomorrow. Where should I go for coffee?" And I'd say
Mm.
place X or place Y, and I know that you will not be let down. I know that those guys are thinking about the guy around the corner and they have to be every bit as good as him, or they used to work for the guy around the corner and now this is their place and they've got to be better than their former boss. So, the element of competitiveness in means that the consumer really wins. Whether you're in Belfast or you're in Letterkenny or you're in Dingle, you will get
Yeah.
wonderful coffee. You will get fantastic coffee. You can also get rubbish, of course, but that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
true. That's really true of any cuisine, of any country's cuisine. There is great
Yeah.
stuff, and there is lots and lots and lots of industrialized rubbish. But
Yeah, but I mean, like Dublin, like right now, for instance, Dublin has way more amazing coffee shops
yeah,
than any city in Italy, for example, for sure.
wow,
That's
which
like
is that's an extraordinary thing to say when you think about it.
I would have never even imagined to say
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
It's like I don't know. Have you ever gone to Unfiltered? Did you guys go to this place? Because
Unfiltered, no. Now we would have in Cork City, which is our nearest big city here to where I live, Filter, which is absolutely exceptional. Really, one of the top 10 places. Unfiltered, no. That's the next
oh
trip
my
to Dublin.
God. Yes. Oh my God. You guys have to go to Unfit. So the other thing that I love about this way of drinking coffee is the fact that it's completely the opposite of Italian mindset. In Italy, you walk into the bar, you scream un caffè while you're approaching. When you arrive at the bancone, like the counter, the coffee is already there. You
Uh,
just put it in like a
Poof.
terrible, tasty medicine, and then you walk out, right? And you
Yeah,
pay, you leave the money, and you go and you walk out. It's like maybe 1.5 minutes.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
drinking filter coffee properly made is a slow food experience, and
It
I think
is. Yeah, yeah.
and it's like, okay, maybe you don't have time sometimes to do that, but when you do, for me, it's an experience. And Unfiltered
Yes,
is the most amazing coffee experience. Because
right.
so here is two guys. Wish I remember their names right now. The main guy is oh, can't remember
You
his name, but he's from Albania, and the other is his colleague is Brazilian, and he does more espresso. But oh my God, I can't believe I don't remember his name. I have to look it up because this is going to bug me. But anyway, so the idea is that they also have a roastery, by the way, called Oni Coffee Roasters, which is also amazing. He was a chemist, basically.
Yeah.
So, and all of his incredible technique and knowledge is on the water, because now in coffee world, water is everything right now. Because you
Everything.
think about it, filter coffee is 99%
Yeah.
water, So every night he makes a recipe for water. People always freak out when I tell them that. What do you mean a recipe for water? It's just water. No. You can
No.
alter the taste of water, and you can add in minerals, and you strip it out. And so
Yeah.
he creates waters that are designed for his own coffees.
Yeah.
And when he makes you a coffee there, he has this laser thermometers that read the temperature of the coffee. So after he's brewed, first of all, he tastes a little bit with a spoon, and he kind of decides what needs to be added. This is after while he's brewing it, and you can taste with him, and you can really understand how he's tasting, basically.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
then he gives you all the different compounds. So it's like between 65 and 55 degrees, you're going to taste this and this and this.
Uh-huh.
And then
Uh-huh.
between 55 and 45, because, that's the other thing. Coffee should be drunk a lot cooler than
Yes.
we think, than we're used to. So it's like, you learn so much, and
Yeah.
is a super, super friendly guy. Now you should definitely go and visit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfiltered
Yeah.
coffee. It's a really
Yeah.
special place.
Yeah. That is actually, and just on that point now, when you're talking there about somebody from Albania and somebody from Brazil, the other thing, which is, of course, has been part of the enrichment of Irish food, has been the arrival of people bringing their own culinary cultures,
Yeah.
but also, as you say, somebody who's a chemist who then turns into coffee. I mean, it reminds me, for example, again, the little ladies with the quiet voices, but there's a little lady up in Ballyhonus called Roisin Curley,
Okay.
who is a chemist from a family of chemists. And when Roisin isn't being a chemist, she is over in Burgundy buying parcels of grapes, which she then makes into the most amazing Burgundies, using her
Okay.
authority and her expertise as a chemist. Now, Burgundy is never cheap. Maybe the cheapest you could get a Roisin Curley Burgundy would be round about €50. It's worth €50, and that's a lot. Remember, we're talking about fermented grape juice, okay? So is fermented
Yeah.
grape juice ever worth €50? A Roisin Curley Burgundy is worth €50. And it's really thrilling there when you see somebody coming from one discipline and taking what they've learned in that discipline, the scientific rigor, the scientific analysis, and applying it to coffee or wine or bread or whatever it may be. And a significant element of that has been people coming to Ireland over the last 2 decades from many other countries. And I think there's still a huge amount of that is going to keep on happening. I really feel the countries we talk about as Eastern Europe, some of whom were in former Iron behind the Iron Curtain, as it was. Um, there's terrific riches there. Terrific riches in wine, terrific
Oh, yeah.
riches in specialty food. And I feel a lot more Irish people are going to go over there to cook, and there's going to be a lot more interaction, and it's going to be for both our benefits. Poland, I haven't been to Poland yet, but I'm really, really, really keen to go and see exactly what's happening in Polish food.
Okay, that's great. Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions, because I know time is ticking, and we could talk forever. I'm curious about a couple of things. So obviously, you guys walk into restaurants, and everyone these days, I suspect, know who they are, right? If they are. So how does that work? I mean, how do you feel like you can write an honest review when the restaurateurs know that you are in the room, or
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
how does that work?
Right. Okay. It usually isn't a problem because the person on the floor won't know who we are.
Okay.
There might be somebody in the kitchen who might know who we are. But the person on the floor will almost never know. Actually, the interesting thing is, and this is kind of annoying, right? Often, if they wind up saying, "Oh, are you McKenna?" It'll be because some other customer said to them, "Do you know who that is
Oh,
over
really?
there on number
They're like
14
ratting
on
you
that?"
out.
Yeah, they rat us out, which is really annoying. That's a very interesting question. The anonymity of the reviewer has been a sacrosanct ingredient in restaurant reviewing for decades. It's very interesting now that the New York Times now uses two women as its restaurant reviewers. Not only do they review the restaurant, they then put up a video of themselves talking about the restaurant. So this is a really significant thing. I've always felt in some ways that the the anonymity of the reviewer was overemphasized, because your job as a critic is to analyze and to assess. It's not to give your opinion. Nobody cares about
Mm,
my opinion. Nobody cares. And I have never imagined for 1 second that they do. What they want is the answer to a very simple question. And that question is this worth my time and money? And
mm,
my job, as I interpret it in reviewing restaurants, is to say, if you go to place X, the reason why you will have a good time is because ABC, and hopefully it has these other elements. It has very good atmosphere. It has very good service. It has very enjoyable music, for example, which is a very big thing for me. And it's very good value for money, because any fool can cook you a really good dinner and charge you €300 for it. And,
mm.
I'm an old school socialist, and I really don't like that very much. I'm happy to pay for food. I am very, very unhappy at feeling that I've been ripped off. So
Yeah.
the anonymity thing isn't really a problem, because from my point of view,
Mm,
the critic's job is to say, I spent a large part of last week writing about the pastel de nata served in a place in Derry called The Fold, trying to
okay,
explain why their pastel worked when most people's pastel in Ireland does not work. And it's all about the
I see.
pastry. And this pastry, from the minute I put my fork into it, and I said, I was with my sister, and I said, listen to that. The pastry was cracking. The pastry doesn't crack. You haven't got it right. You've got it wrong. So
Yeah.
hopefully you're trying to apply that level of analysis and experience. I've been doing it a long time. It's experience. And hopefully that's what people want to read, I hope.
Yeah, no, for sure. The problem is, like, it's more like, do you feel they treat you differently because they know that because it's like
Yeah. Yeah, well,
you're also trying to review a restaurant, and its daily kind of service, not
uh-huh,
necessarily because they
uh-huh.
are going all out for you because they know you're a reviewer, right?
Yeah, 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 yes. The other thing you have to try to do is, if they do that, you have to recognize that they're doing it, because
Mm.
you're observing how they're behaving with the other tables. And if they single you out, that's a very bad mark. That's a very black mark, because everybody else's money is the same as my money. My money's
No,
no
that's the
different.
thing, right? That's
It's
pretty
exactly the same.
important.
And if you're paying all the attention to John and Sally on table 14, and table 11 are putting their arms up saying, hello, hello, can we get some service?
Yeah.
That's a very, very bad thing. The other thing is, the really good modern cooks, this is not an issue for them at all. They,
Mm.
you take the three places I mentioned there: Alta, Comet, Library Street.
Yeah.
Every customer is important. Every customer is treated the same. They're working on such a high plane. And that's why they're so vital, and so important to Dublin.
Yeah, no, I love actually all of those places that you mentioned there. Um, so give me what's your hot takes on what's your favorite? What's the place you've enjoyed the most lately in Dublin?
In Dublin, I you enjoy places for different reasons, right?
I'm not going to say
Uh,
best for that particular
not
reason
best,
because
but most enjoyable. Okay,
the one that you
um,
had the most fun with, one that you liked, or
Chubby's in um, Chubby's in on the north side, on the
okay, I haven't
seafront.
tried it yet. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful room. Jen Stevens made a beautiful room, and Barry Stevens, very, very expert at smoking meats. But it 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 was the two of us. They have a lovely bar. We were sitting at the bar, and it was just such an unpretentious and genuine experience, wherein each person in the team was really determined to do their best, um, and that was just so impressive, and it was so much fun. And
mm,
we were there around about 3 o'clock on a Saturday. It's full of families. They've got nice, thoughtful details. The tables are quite big. The chairs are quite wide. Sometimes it's a problem nowadays, particularly when people say, "Oh, the plates all arrive at the same time." Well, that's great then. Could you please give me a bigger table, because they won't
yeah,
fit? Chubby seemed to be really a room where Barry and Jen had really thought about the food. For years, he ran a great deli on Parnell Street, 147. Really thought about the food. Really thought about the room. great team. Um, on a completely different level, I think what Kevin O'Donnell is doing in Comet
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just delightful. There's a feel in the room that he's an unusually skillful chef. He's unusually skillful,
Mm.
and he does these high wire dishes, the stuffed quail, and you just think, whoa, that's tricky. That's tricky. And he just pulls it off. It's like, the guy who can walk on the tightrope, and it's like he's just walking down the street.
Yeah,
I don't know how he does it.
I actually ate in Bastable 2 nights ago.
Uh-huh.
It's the same guys, right?
Bastable and Comet. No, no,
Oh, it's not. I thought it was the same
no,
owners. It's not.
no, no,
Oh, I don't know where I
no.
got that
Oh, sorry,
mixed up.
yes.
Actually,
It's
it is.
Barry is one of the owners along with Kevin
Oh,
and,
okay,
and
okay,
his girlfriend.
okay.
So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yes, of course. Of course you are.
But I remember feeling a little bit similar thing because the food is quite technical, but it's not
Yeah.
show off. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
it's executed in a way that feels effortless.
Yes.
And when you
Yes.
think about it, you go, there is technique here, but it's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
showing
It
off.
yes, it has food cooking in a restaurant is a performance. But
Mm.
when people overperform, it's just overwhelming. And the restaurants we've mentioned there, Bastable is a great example, 10 years old, 10 years of great food.
Yeah,
Um, there's a modesty which actually goes so far as to say suits Irish cooking.
yeah,
Not shouting about it, letting the food on the plate do it. Some people don't get it. Some people don't get it. Some people go to Bastable and you say, oh, lucky you, that's great. And they say, no, we didn't
mm,
like it. But if again, your job as a critic is not to have opinions before you walk in the door. It's like going to shop at the
yeah,
market. Don't decide what you're going to cook. See what you can find, and then see what you make of it. And it's the same with when you walk in. You don't have an opinion. Oh, I hope they'll do this.
yeah.
I have
No,
no hope or expectations other than always hoping that they'll knock it out of the park, and I'll be there, and I'll say, "Whoa, great! Let's go and tell everybody." And that's the job. Yeah.
yeah. And so, how do you guys work? We kind of were touching briefly on this before we went live because I'm always curious
Yeah.
about duos and especially if you are partners as well. How does the work?
How does the work divvy up? Okay. Sally does almost all of it. And then I do a few little bits that are left over, which is usually the writing. Sally does write occasionally when there's something that she really likes to research, and then she will research it from A to Z.
Okay.
I do most of the reviewing, but most of that writing. Um, and then otherwise, Sally has all the skills. She's a very good photographer. She is very, very good technically, and I am absolutely useless. I'm a 21st century Luddite, and I really don't mind. And so, and then we just interweave, and then it's a question of a discussion. What do you think? Particularly like when you get to the end of the 100 best restaurants,
Yeah.
you're saying if that's in, why is it in? And if that's out, somebody has to be number 101. Remember, if it's out, why is it out? And so we talk about this all of the time, all of the time.
Mm.
And then you just say, okay, that's it, but that's out. And then I write it, and then Sally compiles the photographs. But we've been doing this really, since the late 1980s. We've known each other for a very long time. We met when we were very young, and but Sally, just has all the skills really, and
And
I
do you
just
guys ever do? Because I presume most of the times you both eat right in these restaurants and
yeah.
discuss it. Do you ever like disagree, like terribly disagree on what you think about of a restaurant, for example? I'm curious.
No, no, because when you look at a restaurant, you're looking at the totality of it. You may
Yeah.
say, I didn't think they got that dish quite right, but
Mm.
actually, you know, the atmosphere is sensational, and the staff are terrific, and it's a very nice time, and so on. So I can't think of a particular example where we would have modest. There wouldn't be disagreements. There'd be differences. I might say I like the way this person does this. But like anything else, like a great piece of music, you don't listen to Bach's B minor mass and say, "Oh, could be better." No, 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 no. It couldn't be better. The B minor mass could not be better. So if you have a shared aesthetic, and I think we do, then you agree that the B minor mass is extraordinary. And then Sally will say, "Do you know what? I really don't like Kurt Elling." And I said, "But I like Kurt Elling." Or Steely Dan. Sally will say, "Don't like Steely Dan." And I say, "They're incredible. What's not to like? They're amazing." She said, "No." And she's a real musician and I'm not.
I see. So the disagreement is more on the music than on the restaurant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The music, but not the food. No, no. We're very lucky.
That's very funny. Okay, well, we've been chatting for over an hour. It's been great to have you.
Thank you,
Hopefully, we
Francesco.
can do it another time and explore
I'd love
more
to.
because there's so much more to talk about. But just leave us because I know that again, since a lot of followers maybe come from the United States and they come to Ireland, and I already asked you what was your favorite restaurant in Dublin right now. Tell me because I don't want to just be. I don't want to have a conversation that is Dublin centric. That was more me being, I think, selfish that I wanted to know,
Yeah.
what to
Yeah.
try next. But if you had to pick one restaurant in Ireland right now that the two of you like really, really love, and that can really represent all of the things we've been talking about, what would that be?
It would be Goldie in Cork.
Okay,
Aisling Moore.
she's
Young,
great.
young woman, complete philosophy,
Yeah,
uh, brilliant execution, modest, uh, has all the gifts. It's all there.
yes,
It's all there, and it's on the plate, and it's in the room, and somehow it sums up what Ireland is about in terms of restaurant eating in
yes.
2026. It's exceptional.
That's a great recommendation, and I'm sure people will give it a go when they're visiting. All right, thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Francesco, thank you so much. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the chats, and hopefully soon again.
See you again. Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye. Bye, everyone.